Karen's sneer could curdle milk from a mile away. She stood on the cracked sidewalk, hands on her hips, as if she owned the entire cul-de-sac, and in her mind, she probably did. The air was thick with the kind of tension that makes your stomach knot, the kind that comes when someone's about to learn a lesson they'll never forget. This was Crestwood Estates, a cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood where the HOA ruled with an iron fist, and Karen Miller, the self-appointed queen of compliance, was its most zealous enforcer. Her sister, Linda, was her loyal sidekick, always trailing behind with a clipboard and a sanctimonious nod. Together, they were the HOA Karen sisters, a duo feared by every resident who dared to park a car an inch too far from the curb or plant a tulip that wasn't HOA approved. But today, they'd picked the wrong fight. It started with my van. My handicap-accessible van, to be precise. I'm Jake, 34, and I've been in a wheelchair since a car accident 5 years ago. The van is my lifeline: custom ramps, hand controls, the works. It's not just a vehicle, it's my freedom. I'd parked it in the designated handicap spot outside my house, same as always, with the blue placard clearly displayed. But Karen and Linda had other ideas. Unauthorized vehicle. Karen had barked that morning, her voice echoing through the quiet street like a foghorn. She'd been circling my van like a vulture, her floral blouse clashing violently with the serene pastel houses around us. Linda, ever the dutiful scribe, scribbled furiously on her clipboard, noting some imaginary infraction. This van's an eyesore, and it's not even registered with the HOA, Karen declared, as if my federally protected disability parking permit was just a suggestion. I rolled out to confront them, my heart pounding. Karen, it's a handicap van. It's legally parked. I've shown you the permit 3 times this month. My voice was calm, but inside, I was seething. Karen's eyes narrowed, her double chin quivering with indignation. Don't you dare lecture me about legality, Jacob. This is my neighborhood, and I say that van's a violation. Linda nodded like a bobblehead, muttering about community standards. The neighbors watched from their windows, curtains twitching. Old Mr. Hensley, who'd been fined last month for his unapproved mailbox, shook his head in silent solidarity. Mrs. Carter, who'd once been scolded by Karen for her dog's excessive barking, gave me a sympathetic wave. But no one dared step out. The Karen sisters' reign of terror had silenced them all. By noon, the tow truck arrived. I watched, helpless, as my VAMI lifeline was hooked up and dragged away. Karen stood there, smirking, as if she'd just won a war. Maybe next time you'll follow the rules, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Linda handed me a pink slip with a $500 fine for noncompliance. I gripped the paper so hard it crumpled in my fist. I could have screamed. I could have called her every name in the book. But instead, I smiled. Not because I was happy, God, no, but because I knew something Karen didn't. She'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The next morning, I was at the county courthouse, filing a complaint with the help of my friend Sarah, a disability rights lawyer who lived for cases like this. Sarah's eyes gleamed as she read the pink slip. Oh, Jake, this is gold. They towed a handicap-accessible vehicle from a designated spot. That's an ADA violation. Federal charges. Karen and Linda are about to learn a very expensive lesson. See, the Americans with Disabilities Act isn't just a suggestion, it's the law. Towing a properly permitted handicap vehicle from a designated space isn't just petty, it's illegal. And the fines? They start at $75,000 per violation, with potential jail time for repeat offenders. Karen's little power trip was about to cost her more than her gaudy wardrobe. Sarah and I gathered evidence like detectives on a mission. We got statements from neighbors who'd seen the tow, photos of the empty handicap spot, and even a copy of the HOA's own bylaws, which, surprise, didn't mention anything about requiring HOA registration for disability vehicles. Mr. Hensley, emboldened by the chance to stick it to Karen, provided a video he'd taken from his porch, capturing her triumphant smirk as the tow truck pulled away. Mrs. Carter chipped in with a timeline of Karen's other enforcement antics, like the time she'd fined a veteran for flying an American flag too prominently. By the time we were done, We had a case that could make a prosecutor salivate. Sarah filed the complaint with the U.S. Attorney's Office, citing ADA violations and requesting an investigation into the HOA's practices. Word spread fast. The neighbors, once too scared to speak, started whispering about Karen's downfall. Even Linda, who'd always been Karen's shadow, looked nervous at the next HOA meeting, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Karen, though, she was oblivious. She strutted into the meeting, her usual air of superiority intact, and launched into a tirade about maintaining property values. I sat in the back, my wheelchair tucked against the wall, and listened as she rambled about her latest crusade, banning unsightly garden gnomes. The irony was almost too much. Here she was, plotting her next petty vendetta, while federal agents were already reviewing her case. A week later, the hammer dropped. 2 men in suits knocked on Karen's door, serving her with a notice of investigation from the Department of Justice. I wasn't there, but Mrs. Carter, who'd become my unofficial spy, described the scene with glee. Karen's face went from red to white to green in under a minute. Linda, who answered the door with her, dropped her clipboard and stammered something about a misunderstanding. The agents weren't impressed. The investigation uncovered a pattern. Karen and Linda had been targeting vulnerable residents for years, disabled folks, elderly widows, single parents, anyone who couldn't fight back. They'd racked up dozens of fines and tows, all under the guise of community standards. But my van was the tipping point. The feds didn't just slap them with a fine. They charged the HOA with systemic ADA violations, naming Karen and Linda as primary instigators. The fines piled up, $75,000 for my van, plus another $150,000 for previous violations. And that wasn't counting the legal fees or the civil suit Sarah was preparing on my behalf. The neighborhood buzzed with a mix of shock and vindication. At the next HOA meeting, Karen was a ghost of her former self. Her floral blouse was wrinkled, her hair uncombed, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda, usually her echo, sat silent, staring at the floor. The other board members, who'd enabled the sisters for years, scrambled to distance themselves, claiming they'd never approved the tow. Cowards. I spoke up that night, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. This isn't just about my van, I said, looking straight at Karen. It's about every person you've bullied, every life you've made harder because you thought you were above the law. The room was silent. Even Mr. Hensley, who usually dozed through meetings, sat up straight. Karen didn't meet my eyes. She just stared at her hands, her knuckles white. The fallout was swift. The HOA was dissolved, its funds seized to cover the fines. Karen and Linda were removed from the board, their reputations in tatters. Karen's house went up for sale a month later. She couldn't afford the legal fees and the fines. Linda moved out of state. Rumor has it to live with a cousin who doesn't ask questions. The neighbors started talking again, sharing stories of Karen's tyranny over beers in their driveways. Crestwood Estates felt like a neighborhood again, not a dictatorship. As for me, I got my van back, plus a settlement that covered my legal fees, and then some. I used part of it to install a new ramp at my house, one that's painted bright blue to match my handicap placard. Every time I roll down it, I think of Karen's smirk fading into panic. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it hits hard. Karen thought she was untouchable, a petty tyrant in a suburban fiefdom. But she forgot one thing. The law doesn't care about your HOA title or your floral blouse. It protects the people who need it most. And that's a lesson she'll carry to her grave. The end.